Today, on the 16th bit, Ninja Gaiden re-emerges from the shadows with a shiny new sequel. Medieval Doom is still badass, but the real ball and chain might be its system requirements. New insights around dual heroes from Assassin's Creed Shadows creative director. Dragon Age the Veilguard says farewell in Elvish. And Obsidian takes a stance against open world design in their upcoming RPG. Plus, a deeper discussion on the disaster that is Game Pass with AAA veteran Nate Rudichuk. All that, including giveaways and more, here on our first ever episode of the 16th bit. Let's go.
Somebody, anyone help, I've been going through, hell I've been going through, I've been at odds with myself, I've been so lost in my health, I've been feeling like, deleting myself, man I've been going through hell.
Anyone with a few gray hairs on their head probably played the original Ninja Gaiden back in the Nintendo in the 80s. There's been a slew of games in between, but it's been a long time since anything popped up in the news to legitimately reignite this franchise. And sure enough, this week, like the very same ninjas they represent, Xbox Game Studios dropped a double dose of Ninja Gaiden news on us. First, Ninja Gaiden 4, a co-production between Team Ninja and Platinum Games, and then a release of Ninja Gaiden 2 Black as an Unreal Engine 5 remake, all aiming to return the series back to its brutal roots. According to Microsoft's gaming CEO, Phil Spencer, the idea for Ninja Gaiden 4 originated literally 6 or 7 years ago in an effort to deepen its relationship with Japanese devs. So this would put us around 2018 or 2019. So pre-pandemic, Western consoles really were struggling at the time to secure mainstream Japanese IPs outside of a few big franchises. So the pitch to bring Team Ninja together with Platinum Games, who are known for like over-the-top action like Bayonetta, Metal Gear Rising, Revengeance, apparently really took a while to firm up. But after years of a few small references and vague rumors, Ninja Gaiden 4 was finally unveiled officially during Microsoft's Xbox Developer Direct just this week. Right now it's scheduled for a fall 2025 release, and it will also be a day one Game Pass title. Speaking of Game Pass, we're going to be talking about that more later. The original hero Ryu will return, now alongside a new protagonist, Yakumo, harnessing something called blood binding, which apparently enhances weapons in some kind of way. It's all still under wraps. Despite the hype, some fans have voiced concerns about the dichotomy between Platinum's hyper-stylized combos and Team Ninja's more methodical approach. But still, the synergy between these two studios really could produce a blend that respects the traditional, uncompromising difficulty of Ninja Gaiden, while also evolving its combat systems for 2025. Sounds pretty dope to me. And on top of all that, they also stealth dropped Ninja Gaiden 2 Black, a reimagining of the 2008 sequel, now rebuilt in Unreal Engine 5. This was the game that really ramped up the aggression, it introduced new enemies, it cranked the difficulty to like pretty sadistic levels. So adopting the Black label for the remake signals a return to brutal combat, particularly the limb removal mechanics that really set it apart from competitors. Juicy. Also, don't forget to hydrate. Weirdly enough, though, there's reports of the game failing to register official Xbox controllers on the PC. It's a pretty bizarre oversight. So DualSense controllers from PlayStation, they're working great. But anyway, that said, fans' initial feedback on the gameplay itself is largely positive. It's got the restored violence, it's got frantic combos, and the punishing boss fights that are all welcomed, and a nice Ninja Gaiden return to form. Next up, let's get to the good stuff. Doom: The Dark Ages from id Software is upon us. It's coming hot on May 15th, and I love how this thing looks. Gone are the ultra-modern corridors, neon-scorched landscapes. They have been replaced. All of that junk has been replaced with an acid-tripped medieval hellscape that is filled with oversized guns, massive dragons, and giant rock'em sock'em robots. The latest news here, though, are really around the reports that advanced ray tracing is required for this game, even on the most minimum and lowest settings, and its recommended RAM is 32 gigs. So that's not outlandish in today's environment, but there is a big chunk of the world that's still not equipped to handle that. And like, seriously, part of me does admire id for just like making their hardcore game for hardcore gamers. So when you don't compromise and, you know, you do cut your audience down. So like, but still the ones that have the gear, they'll love you even more for it. So it's really tough to know exactly where the line is, but id's walking it. Now, their executive producer, Marty Stratton, made a pretty big announcement the other day that there will be no multiplayer in this game. So this is another area that they're doubling down on. They're saying that they just sunk every single resource they had into the single player side, labeling the Dark Ages as the biggest, most epic, craziest campaign in the whole series. So for longtime fans, this actually might be a dream scenario. So you don't have any kind of shoehorned PvP or co-op. There's no dividing dev time between balancing demon loadouts and doing all this stuff for like an online meta, right? But instead, the entire dev team just pours into orchestrating monstrous set pieces like gargantuan medieval mech suits against hordes of hellspawn, just riding cybernetic dragons all in the thick of battle. Like, the game looks effing awesome. I'm sure the soundtrack is crazy too. And they're just like making the Slayer an Iron Tank style character is just chef's kiss. But their video, that when they talked about it, they really dug into their core values at id, and they label them as innovation, craftsmanship, and performance. So look, the business guy in me, I always think of this, like core values are key to a company, but only if people abide by them. So I don't think it's lip service over there. This is not corporate Kool-Aid. These values, innovation, craftsmanship, and performance, like, you could see it just in the footage that they've released in this game. Like, it's wild. And so they matter a lot when the entire team embodies them. And I really think that they have. I think they're going to deliver on all three. So one last note on performance. Bethesda and id, they did tease a future patch for DLC, and it could integrate path tracing, which is a step beyond standard ray tracing. But the real question is whether your GPU and your patience can handle it. So starting with a recommended 32 gigs of RAM, suggests a visual extravaganza, but it could really leave mid-range builds out in the cold. So historically, Doom 2016, Doom Eternal, they were really well optimized. So it's possible that Dark Ages will just scale down efficiently. But if id nails it, then we could see a pretty impressive fusion of medieval set dressing, advanced lighting, and just unstoppable demon carnage. And like, if not, well, then we'll just talk about it here on a later episode. Moving on, I know Assassin's Creed Shadows has been covered seemingly to death, so I'm going to keep this light for you guys. The devs shared a bit more context around their heroes, and it was something I thought was kind of interesting. So, Ubisoft originally wanted to combine both sides of feudal Japan into this game. So you've got shinobi, which are the ninjas, right? That's specializing in espionage, sabotage, assassination. And then you got samurai, totally different, right? It's all about honor, duty, and loyalty. So it's like when you put both roles into one character or protagonist, you're going to get something akin to, say, Ghost of Tsushima's Jin Sakai, right? Who like juggles honorable duels with stealthy kills. However, creative director Jonathan Dumont really went on the record insisting that combining both of those roles into one character would dilute each distinctly. Like, the archetypes would just become too soft and much more than they were comfortable with. So they settled on having two separate heroes. So you've got the shinobi Neo, I should know how to pronounce that, but whatever the girl's name is, matching the classic Assassin's Creed infiltration. And then you've got Yasuke, who is the character that will follow the samurai's path. So personally, I think having one character and allowing the player to choose their own path is way cooler than switching between the two, but it's a massive caveat, especially as a fellow game designer now. I would say I think the ability to scale that properly would just be an absolute nightmare and extremely messy to do. So I do understand why they split it, but it's still a compromise. So now, all the pushback about making Yasuke African-American, or just African rather, and basing him off of a historical character is just a whole other thing. Like, we don't need to get into it in great detail, although I will say that, like, just why the hell would you just base him on someone historical and not her? Like, why would you just put one half of that in there, but the girl's completely made up? Like, that part I just don't get. And whatever the case, I don't really care what anyone else says here. it would be one thing if they just Hamilton this shit and just race swapped like half the other samurais. So like half the samurais are black or Scottish or Persian or Indian or whatever you want. But then but they didn't do that, right? They just have one dude that's like different from everyone. So you're gonna notice it constantly throughout the entire playthrough. And noticing it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean it's bad. It doesn't mean it's good. It just means you notice it. You're looking at someone's skin color and you're noticing that while you're playing a game. Look, their executive producer labels what I'm saying as intolerance, but it's not. This is just weird. And so whatever the case, they're doing it. There's no changing it. It's really not a big deal. Let's move on. Wrapping up on Assassin's Creed, their game director pinned the delays on super complex roofs, his words, and getting their parkour right. So we are developing a games ourselves as heavy in parkour elements. I can respect that, but the phrase super complex roofs is something I cannot. Ubisoft also confirmed that the game will integrate the Animus Hub, formerly named Assassin's Creed Infinity, which should bridge with future AC titles. So this might hint at cross-game events or expansions, but the details are fuzzy, and from what I can gather, nobody cares. So this entire game is a gamble, and it makes me very uncomfortable. Look, like my palms are sweating. My palms are sweating just thinking about this. So let's move to the next segment. BioWare. In the news again. Dragon Age the Veilguard launched last October, and as quickly as it arrived, it apparently has had enough. The studio rolled out patch 5, which it called the final major update, capping patch notes with Dareth Shiral, which apparently is their Elvish phrase for farewell. So fans anticipated expansions, maybe some post-launch content, but BioWare signaled early that the Veilguard would only get minor fixes, and now even those are effectively over. EA's internal analysis indicates that the Veilguard reached 1.5 million players. That is a lot, but it is half of what EA expected. This contributed to a real big downturn. It linked to a slowdown in EA's revenue. The stock market punished them with a 16% drop. That erased $6 billion in market value. Ouch. While Dragon Age remains a beloved IP, the Veilguard shortfall is a cautionary tale, and it's part of the larger AAA revolution that's playing out right now that you're all experiencing. Still, the abrupt end to the support, less 3 months post-launch, that feels like unheard of for a modern big budget RPG. It's just like another disaster story coming up one after the other. So even Anthem limped along with updates for a year before it was shelved. Veilguard, in contrast, just wrapped up with a handful of bug fixes, photo mode improvements, quest glitch repairs, and a sign-off that effectively says, see you on the next one. Their game director left, announcing that she'd received an offer that she couldn't turn down, which added to the sense that the ship has sailed. Now, I think this is hilarious because this industry is so freaking weird. Like, hey, so, I was the director of the game, contributed to a $6 billion loss. Whoops. But this other company here is going to pay me much more. So good luck with all that. Like, I can't understand the way any of this stuff operates. But anyway, as to why the game failed, that's a story for another time, or just go online. There's countless other people on YouTube that have put giant, huge videos just to get dedicated to picking apart why the game failed. And I think most of them are probably right. So check them out if you like that kind of spicy drama. Last up in our headline roundup, Obsidian's Avowed hit the news. For anyone unfamiliar, this is an RPG set in the same world of Pillars of Eternity, and it's slated for February 18th release. The developers shared some of their thought process for not going open world with this one, and instead opting for a series of large sequential zones. Their rationale is pretty sound. Going more linearly gives them a tighter control over the pacing and the narrative cohesion of the game. So I think fans were fairly split between not caring and general curiosity of why they would not make this game open world like many other modern RPGs. But the regional director summed it up pretty well. And they were just basically saying that pacing is near impossible to manage when you can't predict which quest lines a player has tackled first. So it gets messy. I respect that. Open world at certain scale just adds crazy complexity, and it often results in vanilla yogurt flavored storytelling, like life in general. Like your life is literally open world. Like there's amazing moments, don't get me wrong, I get that, but like most of the time you spend in your life doing whatever you do, let's just say the majority of it is not very glamorous. Games work far better as an escape from real life, not a reflection of it. That said, their decision to not go open world really helped them shape quest lines that have way more consequential actions and results to those decisions that you make. Their narrative designer went on record explaining how they categorize the outcomes. Short-term impacts in immediate dialogue or quest results. You're going to have medium-term changes that could happen across connected missions, and then you're going to have major repercussions that could ripple through the entire game, or the overarching plot, right? Based on how you play. So this layered approach really does give a defined approach to the entire thing. I think it's one of Obsidian's thing that they're really well known for. You look at like Fallout New Vegas, Pillars of Eternity, like it's no surprise to see them doubling down on this. I trust them. I think they're going to figure it out. So they're tapping into their trademark gray area goodness. And I think the result should be a calibrated story that's got good triggers. It's got optional cool stuff to do. And this kind of design fosters replay value, which is king in today's landscape. Like, as an aside, if you don't have like replay value, then like half your audience will get nearly the same experience just watching someone else play the game on Twitch versus playing it themselves. So anyway, all this, it's arriving day one on Xbox Game Pass. Avowed does have a platinum edition with up to 5 days of early access if you want to grab it. So otherwise, just a few more short weeks till it's out, and then see you then. Today, we're speaking with Nate Rudichuk. He has worked on some major AAA titles, most recently Cyberpunk 2077. Now he's heading up operations at Red 16. Hello, Nate.
Hey, Rob. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to dive right in, man. Tell me, what is the problem with Game Pass?
Well, Game Pass is a really interesting idea. Obviously, the Netflix of games, right? We want to take a bunch of old games and new games and bundle them into a subscription title service. So pretty much anybody, anywhere, as long as they pay the monthly cost, can access the catalog of games anytime, all the time. And it's a great idea for the consumer, especially today, because obviously people have a list of games they want to try, and now they get to try it for like the low price of whatever, $20 a month.
Sure.
But obviously long term, I think there's a lot of concerns with the economic viability of this. Obviously, I think it's going to hurt developers in the future. And to be honest with you, I think it's actually going to create a product that is subpar for consumers going forward. So
like you said, I'm not too familiar with it, right? Game Pass is just on Xbox mostly, but sure. So great for consumers, but like from what I gather, what is it? Is it lost opportunity for money? Like how is it killing? It's strangling this industry.
Well, so Xbox has made an interesting transition. I think that they've looked at their console and said, okay, we're not winning this. We're not capturing all the players we want to capture. So we're kind of changing into more of a content production house, almost like a big publisher, but more of a distributor digitally. So I think their goal is to say that Game Pass is kind of going to be ubiquitous for a lot of other platforms, whether it's PC, Xbox, Series X or whatever, maybe even PlayStation. I doubt that that'll go through, but they're going to try to be a content distributor. And the challenge here, I think, is really just when you're distributing content like this and you're packaging everything, you're basically putting a limiter on the total content and the total audience that you can get. So Xbox Game Pass has about 34 million subscribers right now. And I think that their revenue is around like 1.2 billion on the high end a year. Maybe that's old numbers, but that's what I've read.
34 million
people are playing. And so if you think about that, any game that has 34 million players or 34 million downloads or purchases, I mean, that's incredible. You've hit the ball out of the park. But here's the problem. There are 400 titles on Game Pass right now. And those 400 titles are like Skyrim, all the Call of Duties, big titles, heavy hitters. And so consumers are obviously just going to be going to those and playing what they want to play. Any new title or anybody coming into this is now having to compete for a limited number of audience, right, which is that 34 million, and they're competing with 400 other titles that are probably major AAA budget games. Very hard, and the upside at most is obviously $1.2 billion a year, which sounds like a lot, but if you divide it equally by 400, that means every game is making just under $3 million a year, which if you run a studio, if you know the cost of hiring developers, if you're trying to build something big, that's nothing. It's really, really hard.
Fortnite alone makes 3 to 4 billion a year, just Fortnite, right?
Exactly.
So it's strangling, especially the newer developers that are trying to come in and get seen, right? It's just becoming a battle for them.
I think it's really high risk for new developers. If Microsoft owns your studio and they're funding your entire production, great. I mean, I'm sure you have at least a bit more breathing room now because, again, the failure of this is that Microsoft will just pick up the tab and whatever. You've learned your lesson. You make a new game. For the third party guys coming in that don't have that support, that aren't financially backed by Microsoft, I think the risk here is that 34 million people is a lot, and you will reach them, but the value of that is so low that it's actually not even worth it. And I read somewhere that up to 80% of your premium sales, which is the one-time sale, right? You sell a game one time at the beginning for a fixed cost. That's your premium sale. 80% of premium sales are lost on the Game Pass, which means that you're leaving 80% of your sales on the table as a publisher, as a developer, as an indie developer, if you go with Game Pass. That means there's a lot of money left over, unfortunately.
Sure, but what's the alternative, right? It's like, then everyone's got to manually buy all their games, and then now you're opening up another can of worms because, to me, that we were just talking about the standardization of pricing of games, which is probably a whole other discussion, right? But it's like, if every game is $70, then that would assume that there's some bar that every game has to hit, and then there's also a tremendous amount of risk if you buy a game, can't return it, or whatever. And so, it's so much pressure. But for someone that could just subscribe to a Game Pass, get all the games that they want, I mean, it makes a lot more sense for the user. What would the alternative be? Like, what's the path forward from here if there is one?
Sure. So let's break that down into a few points because I think it's really important. So the first thing is, yes, obviously, as a consumer today, as a player, your best value is Game Pass today. All the games that you've wanted to play in the past that are on Game Pass, the cost of playing them now is so low, you absolutely should download this and try. I think the conversation goes, what about the games of the future? And I don't mean this year. I mean after 5 or 10 years of this, what happens to those games and the quality of those games that are getting released on Game Pass? And I think that the issue is that this is only sustainable because we have such a backlog of games and a huge catalog that we can dump into Game Pass to get extra value. Games that have already sold 5 years ago, 10 years ago, you can put them on a place like Game Pass and maybe get extra reoccurring revenue, which is really good for a business. But again, those are games that have already been made. Let's talk about kind of the release and premium sales of games in the future. And, why would a developer go to the classic premium method when they can go to Game Pass? And I think the issue with this is that we're not looking at games as a entertainment product keeping up with inflation. If you look at the price of games over time, yes, they've gone up, but relative to the inflation, they've gone down. The price has actually gone down since like the 80s. And the challenge is that obviously as expectations grow, we want better games, we want more spectacle, whatever, the cost will grow as well, right? You have to pay developers competitive wage. You have to pay for a studio, and that money never goes down. That always goes up. So you're kind of limiting yourself with what you can do, especially with these lower cost games. You have to sell a lot of them to make your money back. So the challenge with Game Pass is that you're taking that trajectory of games getting cheaper and cheaper, and you're accelerating it downward, right? You're accelerating it to the point where it's almost uneconomical to make most games on that method. And
it's like a race to the bottom.
It's a race to the bottom, and we won't know the cost of this for a while because Microsoft, remember, is eating the losses. They're paying for everything. So the second they stop paying and this thing has to stand by itself, then you'll see how uneconomical I think a lot of this stuff actually becomes. And
It reminds me. It reminds me a lot of like even Spotify in a way, because what it did to the music industry. So it's like dating myself here, right? But people that actually went to get albums like when they came out. You know, I remember getting like Metallica's S&M album right at the store.
yeah,
But the thing is that it was more of a drip feed, and these services make it a faucet. And in a way, it can cheapen the experience, and then also create stress for backlog too. But I just don't want to forget I never want to forget the user, right? You don't want, there's no money to waste, I guess, when it comes to buying games. And so Game Pass still seems like a somewhat reasonable choice for them versus the alternative, which is to go out and build your own library.
sure. And today it probably is for games that have already been created. I think the issue with everything here is, first of all, if you compare the Spotify model, listening to songs, first of all, those are like what, 4 minutes at a time. And how often do you listen to songs? Like, people may have songs on repeat, but are you listening to a song 1,000,000 times, 500,000 times? You know what I mean?
Right.
You may listen to it 50 times and get enough out of it. So the consumption patterns are different for even things like, Spotify or even Netflix, where you can binge watch a series, but that could be 10 hours, right? If it's a mini series. Think about how long people spend on games.
Seriously,
thousands of hours. So
the value's insane.
the value per hour is a completely different model, right? People don't want to play necessarily hundreds of games a year. They want to pick the ones that they want to spend their time on and really invest their time into it. And you're seeing that with player patterns. So the model is different. But if we go back to player value for a second, I think the important part here is this. You get what you pay for, right? If a game is free to play, they have to make money somehow. And that changes the way the game model works and the way the gameplay features work. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but it is a reality, right? If you pay a premium cost, which is a single payer, one-time expense to build a library, now you have a different monetization model, and that actually impacts the gameplay. If developers are looking at this and going, we're losing money making these games, but we want to release it on Game Pass, all that's going to happen is they're going to change the way that they make their video games. They have to. They have to eat too. They have to pay their bills, right?
Sure.
If not, they just shut down and now nobody gets any games. So the challenge for the consumer is, are we comfortable going in a direction where people aren't monetizing in a way that's premium? They're monetizing in more of a free way, and every game has to change the way they monetize for it to be, sustainable. And I think the challenge there is that does hurt the consumer. That hurts the consumer because people actually are becoming limited in the features and types of gameplay they can choose from, because the monetization model really only rewards a certain type of game. Think about this. I believe, just like Netflix and Spotify, Microsoft pays out based off of time played or hours, right? Hours played per month of a certain game. So if you think about that, and let's just say that's a fact, just like Netflix, right? You want to make something that's bingeable, people always want to watch and repeat. For a game, it's even worse. You want to make a game that people spend all their time on, right? As opposed to something that might be a more disposable or short experience. Well, now that's not economical. You can't make a short experience that ends. You have to make something that people always come back to, which isn't a bad thing. But of course, for a player, now they don't have a choice. Now most of the games that they like have to follow this model in order to work. And I think that just hurts the player base. That hurts everybody because now choice is eliminated, right? So
it sounds like a big, hairy, messy issue that is probably not going to get fixed anytime soon. So I don't want to take too much more time here now. So I just want to say thanks for all this great insight. You've given a lot to think about. Can't wait to see what people say in the comments too. It's a divisive topic, but it's one that is causing problems, and as you said, shaping how games are made. So it's super important. But that'll do for now, though. Thanks so much, Nate. I'll catch you on the next one.
Thanks, Rob. We'll see what the future holds. Cheers.
You got it. Bye.
Bye.
All right. Let's take it home with a quick spotlight on DragonTwin, a deliciously ambitious indie project that I've been following for some time now. The vision is an open-world RPG strategy hybrid that's all about taming and riding dragons in a medieval fantasy sandbox. I think this is such a great idea. Like, From everything I can find, this game is being made by one single solitary sole developer named Gustav Sidenius Siden. I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce it. Sorry, bud. But he's building it in Unreal Engine 5. He's been posting weekly progress updates on his Discord, showcasing everything from flight physics to destructible environment prototypes. So some of the more recent announcements are even hinting at like destructible cities, a dynamic terrain system, just more craziness. And apparently, like, he had to take a 2 to 3 month monk mode study break to complete his university degree because, sadly, building a dragon-themed epic game does not stop the real world from calling. So, after returning from this hiatus, Sidenius hit the ground running, apparently reorganizing code for better performance, tinkering autopilot functionality, refining dragons, how they hover or break mid-flight. And again, like, this is just me following this stuff. I haven't talked to him yet or any of that stuff. I just admire the hell out of this. He's envisioning commanding armies from afar via Dragonback, forging alliances, waging war across multiple open world regions. I mean, I love the ambition here. That said, Sidenius, brother, you need money and you need a team if you're going to bring this vision to life. And you can get it. I am sure of that. So all that said, I believe a pair of interns are going to soon join this project if they haven't already, focusing on everything from environment art to the newly revealed Dragon Creator. So early access rollout, from what I can tell on Patreon, is imminent, with the first playable build planned in early February. So I signed up. I'll see if I can give it a shot myself. As a reminder, our hat tip spotlight is never paid for. The stuff is just things that we are genuinely inspired by. So for me, this game premise has got incredible potential to it. I think this could also go the route of Manor Lords, which took over 7 years to make. So we're rooting for you, full force here, man. This game just feels fresh. I would love to play it with your vision. So if you're curious like I am, follow DragonTwin's progress at DragonTwin.com. Join their Discord. And yeah, tip of the hat to you, sir. May your hats fly as high as your dragons. Okay, if you made it this far, that's awesome. This channel is brand new, so we're crafting some giveaways to spark growth. Also say thanks to new fans. Please check out the pinned comments below for the latest details. Let me know, also really important, let me know who else that we should be checking out for the community spotlight. So there's so much cool stuff out there. Just point me in the right direction. We'll check it out. Special thanks to the amazing Ren for allowing use of his incredible music on this channel. If you know, you know. And until then, cheers. Thank you. Hit me up anytime at rob@r16.com. And I seriously do read all of them. So just shoot me an email with anything that you want. And yeah, keep it real till the next one. Cheers.